Hello and welcome to ASM Connected, the podcast brought to you by ASM Technologies. In this episode, we're joined by John Attala, Vice President of Worldwide Sales at Endace. He was interviewed by our Sales Director Iain Tomkinson. Iain and John discuss how new tools are impacting the cybersecurity industry, how attacks are becoming more advanced, why going 100% channel has been beneficial for Endace, and they give their best predictions of what might happen in the next 12 to 18 months.
Thanks for taking the time out, John. I suppose one of the things that I'm really quite interested in, I love trying to understand company cultures, and particularly when it's a cross-border international business. And one of the things that really fascinates me about Endace is that you guys started out of a New Zealand university project. That's fascinating. How did that come about, and what happened there, John?
Gosh, that's a great question. And first off, thanks for having me. I appreciate ASM Technologies and yourself taking the time to have the interest and to interview Endace. About 20 years ago, a computer science professor at Waikato University in Hamilton, New Zealand, developed a project to capture latency on the network and developed what we called DAG cards and began to market them in public forums, universities, presenting, and lo and behold, there was incredible interest in the high-frequency trading industry, in the service provider industry, and not long after 9/11 happened and things really took off, because that was one of the really critical points when people realized we should probably know a little bit more about what's traversing our network. So it went from latency to packet capture, and it's evolved ever since, and it's been a great story over the past 20 years. Endace has had quite an evolution. One thing Endace is really great at is partnering. We're 100% channel, and we're great at listening to customers. Yeah. Our technology has evolved through the years based on customers asking us to do more and more with our core technology, which is capture packets.
Okay, that is an interesting story, and I'll come back to the channel aspect, because obviously I know you guys are channel friendly. I'll come back to that in a little bit, and I suppose I wanted to just dig into a little bit more of the company sort of culture, because again, that is an interest of mine. New Zealand isn't particularly well known for its tech startups, as far as I'm aware anyway. So how does a company that's based out in New Zealand end up being headquartered in Austin, Texas, with you based in sort of Silicon Valley and offices across Europe? How does that work? I suppose two things from I take it that there's a strategy to make sure you've got a global footprint there, but also how does that affect the company culture? Because obviously Silicon Valley culture versus New Zealand, I'm sure there's going to be some differences there.
No, that's a great question. And how I'll answer that is we're actually headquartered in Hamilton, New Zealand, or Auckland. From the inception, when you're from New Zealand, you are an international company, right? In order to grow your customer base, you have to be relevant in the North American market as well as the EMEA market, in addition to APAC. So right from the inception, you have that cultural international flavor to what you're doing. And the interesting thing about Endace and how our culture has evolved over the years is when I joined Endace 10 years ago, we were a public company on the London Stock Exchange. And we got acquired by a NASDAQ company out of Costa Mesa. And then Endace spun out about 5 years ago to its current ownership, which is Stuart Wilson, our CEO, and our CFO, Andrew Harson. Our culture is one of really full transparency. We share information so that the engineers understand the deals that we're doing. So it's not just siloed in verticals or siloed with just the sales team, or the US just knows about a deal and Europe doesn't know about a deal. We do an incredible job of sharing information from sales to product to engineering so that everybody understands what's important to the customers and how our product's being used, and most importantly, how we can get better.
Yeah, no, that is really important. If you've got that sort of sharing culture and that customer focus, that's a huge market advantage, because as you mentioned, a lot of organizations tend to be siloed. And I remember reading an interesting one about Sony, and they were very siloed as an organization. And before Apple had iTunes and where they became, Sony obviously had owned Sony Music, and they actually developed something called, I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was basically the iPod before Apple did, and they owned Sony Music. So if they'd actually spoken to each other as a business, they could have probably been first to market on that with probably a better technical solution. But I always say that Apple are a great organization because at the end of the day, they're a marketing company that does technology, whereas somebody like BlackBerry or somebody like that, they're a technology company that did a little bit of marketing. And I think that can make a bit of a difference, being siloed in that communication and that marketing field to a company's culture. So yeah, that's really interesting.
A company of our size, you really feel the difference if everybody's not rowing in the same direction.
I remember when we first spoke, and one of the things that you gave me was a very layman's terms overview of what Endace probes actually do. And as soon as I heard that, it just was like, wow, that makes perfect sense. And I completely get why particularly enterprise scale organizations would buy an Endace product. Can you just run that by me again and for the listeners as well? Because it was a brilliant sort of overview of it.
You bet. I hope I remember it, Ian. You've made it sound so great. Most people don't realize that there is a tool on the market that records the network at the packet level and provides what we call network history. And if you think about that, having access to what's happened on your network for yesterday, or maybe 2 days ago, or a week ago, or a month ago is incredibly valuable. So in the simplest analogies, you can look at us as the black box on a flight, right? When something happens, you're able to go back and see exactly what happened. Some people liken us to physical security of video cameras. We have the ability to be able to integrate with a lot of the major security and networking tools that are in the market. So the IDSs, the SIMs, the firewalls, the APM tools, the AI tools that are really hot, the SOAR tools that are really taking off. We complement those tools because we integrate with them. And when analysts go back to look and see what happened, they can stay in the workflow that they're used to, whether that's, say it's Splunk, and they want to see exactly what happened, what caused this alert, what triggered it. They can right click in the Splunk workflow and get the packets that correlate to that alert. So when I boil Endace down is what we do is we're this repository of truth on your network. And we give analysts the ability to solve problems in real time. But these guys are so overworked with alerts that are coming in. There's alert fatigue and tool fatigue because they have to use so many tools to respond to alerts. Is they're able to, with Endace, pivot back and get the information that caused the exact information down to the packet level and solve alerts faster and more effectively.
Yeah, I was surprised actually when I was just doing a little bit of research, and I was actually amazed at how many the cybersecurity market is. In some ways, I suppose I would describe it as saturated, but I know it's not because there's new threats and new technologies, and it's evolving all the time, which is what makes it so interesting. But I couldn't actually believe that sometimes that these guys are using 20, 30, 40, 50 tools to try and monitor what's going on the network, particularly on an enterprise grade network. And you forget the actual human impact of managing all that. And if Endace can support, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I would tell you that what's going on in the market too is there's a lot of tools, like you said, in different departments, in different organizations, particularly Fortune 1000 companies, have a lot of tools. There's tool fatigue. The analysts are trying to learn how to use all these different tools in their network to solve all these different problems. And most enterprises have an initiative called tool consolidation. And so what Endace helps is, because we're that central repository, we can connect to just the tools that matter. And so when they start eliminating tools, they can actually get much more efficient, and they can get much more predictable on how they're going to analyze or investigate certain responses.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating and a great solution. And I know, obviously, actually, it's in the news today, a fascinating sort of overview. And having read an article that you wrote in 2019 about healthcare and the legacy systems that healthcare professionals are using. It's really quite poignant when I saw an article on the BBC News today about some poor lady in Germany had passed away because some hackers basically attacked the hospital, and her life-changing surgery or life-threatening surgery basically couldn't take place because these hackers have basically taken down part of this hospital. And apparently the hackers didn't target the hospital, but because it was described as a university hospital, they thought it was a university, and they've attacked it, taken it down, and this poor lady has passed away. And that, for me, particularly tied in with the conversation and your article about these legacy systems, and there is now a criminal investigation pursuing. So not only is your sort of technology potentially been used to help the kind of technologies to help people unwind an event that's happened on a network, but it could potentially be used for a criminal investigation to support these people.
Yeah, absolutely. What a sad story, right? It's awful to hear about that, the poor woman and her family. It's a shame that cybersecurity is getting to the point where it's actually affecting lives. I'm sure that wasn't intentional, but nonetheless, that's what happens. We all rely on networks as critical parts of our organizations, regardless of what industry you're in. And particularly healthcare, we've got a lot of healthcare customers. And the healthcare industry, they're fabulous customers. They do have a lot of legacy gear. One of the issues they have is they have small teams, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times when we work with hospitals, they are the network operators as well as the security team. So they have to be across multiple different issues, whether it's a network performance issue or an application performance issue or an access issue. And you think about it, how many partners hospitals have and who needs access to their networks. Running a hospital network is complex. And so when something does happen, when there's a performance issue or, God forbid, a hack, a security breach, and they need to go back and investigate what happened, they need to do it quickly and definitively. And that's part of what Endace brings. Unfortunately, we can't stop that kind of attack. That's not what we do. But we can support the investigation after post-event to make sure that once they get to the data on the network that triggered, right, or how the attackers got in, we can help that to resolve that threat, that breach definitively, because we've recorded every packet that's traversed the network.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense, and I've obviously try and keep her up to date. And there's the Gartner Institute. Gartner is saying that by 2022 that the cyber attacks are going to get more clever. AI is going to be coming involved. These attackers are going to be using artificial intelligence to try and mimic and copy social media events and the way that we behave on a network, and we're going to be dealing with a whole new level of attacks. However, if it's 30% in 2022 that are going to be using AI, that means that 70% is still going to be traditional VPN attacks, still going to be passwords, and there's lots of entry points on a network. And I know from some of the work that you guys have been doing as well with and the partnerships that you have with the likes of Palo Alto, Cisco, as you mentioned, Splunk, and fascinatingly Darktrace as well, which obviously is becoming a Gartner leader in its field. Those partnerships, I can see those adding real value as well to the work that Endace does.
Partnerships is at the core of Endace, and listening to our customers and what I mentioned before, they don't want to learn new tools, right? They are selecting strategic tools that help them do their jobs better and more effectively. And what they want is they're looking for, if they're going to add a new tool, they want a tool that complements the tools they already have in place, right?
Yeah.
And most organizations have their firewall and their SIEM. They're adding AI. They have their APM tools, right? What they want is they want to give their analysts, their operators, another solution that helps them leverage the tools and the workflows that they already have. You have your Palo Alto firewall team. You have your Splunk team. You may have your Q Radar IBM SIM team, right? And those analysts are eyes on glass looking at those tools 24/7. What really helps them that we provide is they can stay in that workflow. and they don't have to learn a brand new product. Endace is very simple to operate. It integrates seamlessly with those tools for free at no cost. And the other big bonus is that it's effective from a cost standpoint. It doesn't cost an arm and a leg to roll Endace out, but it can also be on a global network. All our probes can be searched simultaneously. So these big organizations with fast networks, with complex networks, are ones that we focus on as well, because our openness to connect to the tools that they want, so we can connect to those tools that we've talked about. We can also host analytics. So if there's a spot in your network where you don't have an IDS and you'd like it, maybe a remote office, or maybe you're having an application performance issue at a smaller office where you don't have your APM server.
I suppose the conversation about, do you work directly or do you work with channel? And obviously you guys have gone with channel. What makes you want to utilize the channel, and why have you gone down that route?
Yeah, a great question. Is we've been channel for 100% channel for probably 8 or 10 years. And when you're a small global company, you need the reach into all the markets. Our biggest markets are federal governments across the globe, global banks, healthcare, and then Fortune 2000. And so the channel has developed great trust within those organizations, bringing services and solutions that those verticals need. And we're not a well-known brand like a Palo Alto or a Cisco. So when we develop the trust with our channel partners, and our channel partners can see the value that we bring to the end users, and they can see that it's a great product to represent because we have incredibly high customer satisfaction rates, it makes them confident and comfortable selling a solution like ours. And the other nice thing for the channel is we complement those other products that they've sold, right? Most channel partners have sold Cisco, IBM, Splunk, Palo Alto. They've sold those. And when they can complement something they've already sold and make those tools even better, and where the market's going right now is this whole automation, orchestration, and many of our partners are embracing that and wrapping their services around it. Not only can we complement a tool that the channel's probably led with, a Cisco or a Palo, but as they evolve and provide more services around orchestration, automation, they can incorporate Endace, make those tools better, and then also sell services around it. So it's really a win for everybody.
Yeah, that's a great message. And I know a lot of the sales guys, they're always looking for a different conversation to have with a customer outside of the Ciscos and the Palos and the Splunks. And they're obviously tools that everybody needs and everybody buys, and that they're great at what they do. But I suppose to have an upsell and also an opportunity to wrap services around, that's great for the reseller community. It really is. And that there aren't as many opportunities as there perhaps should be to utilize the channel for that. And I've seen how the channel can directly have an impact on vendors similar to yourselves that perhaps don't have huge sales forces, that they want to spend their time developing a product where the channel can really add the value. And it's that reach into that market and those relationships that really make a difference for me, which is why I love working in the channel.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. A lot of it's, when you say, I agree everything that you said with, and it's all about trust, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We know how to work with the channel, and we provide a product that the channel can be proud to represent.
And I suppose a couple of, more sort of interesting questions, again, going back onto my interest in international business and company cultures. How have you found it's obviously been based in the US with that sort of global feel, selling into the UK and Europe? What challenges does that present to you, if any?
We've been really fortunate to have a European sales team out of London for a number of years. And some of our most tenured, probably maybe our most tenured salesperson on our team has been there 10 years as well. So been incredibly fortunate. One thing about Endace is our our entire company has pretty long tenures. We've got a great core group of people, and many of them are salespeople. So in an industry where you see salespeople, I think on average change careers 18 months to 2 years, Ian, Endace has a longevity with their sales force, especially selling a tool like ours, and the different things we see in these different networks really allows us to provide not only value to the channel and explaining things of how we can work, but also the explanations to the customers on the value that we bring. One of the challenges, and we've experienced this together, is with all the different countries in Europe and all the different logistics and shipping and taxes and things like that. That's one huge value that ASM has brought us on the deals that we've done together. There's lots of challenges, I would say, being a global organization, but when you partner with the right people and you have an experienced sales team, we've been blessed to really minimize the impacts of being global in a small company.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And we've in the UK in particular, we've been very much used to over the years the international, particularly US-based vendors selling products into the UK, and we're very used to that. Interesting, we don't see many go the other way. We don't see many sort of British companies selling into the US or starting products. And I don't know if that's down to that sort of investment culture in the US that the US has. And I think there's a very different focus on tech companies. And I know particularly in cybersecurity, for example, Israel's been a hotbed of cybersecurity innovation for quite a period now. And you only have to start talking cybersecurity before people start naming Israeli vendors. And I'm aware of a couple that we work with that come out of Israel. And I believe that's down to their sort of culture from the military, and that they have, I suppose, you can go into a conscription into the military, but you don't have to serve on the front line. You can go into cyber, and they've got that culture. And then there's this investment strategy, and then they all tend to head to the US again for further investment. Do you think it is that the investment in particular in Silicon Valley is still there, and it's still quite exciting?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. The Silicon Valley is the hotbed for investment, particularly if you're a young startup company. As you described that, I was thinking about really being a New Zealand-based company. Our culture, we've learned how to sell into other countries and other geos from our inception. It's ingrained in what we do. And we have an incredible sales ops logistics team headquartered actually in London that helps us sell globally. We are a New Zealand-based company, and being global and operating global is second nature to us. It's just ingrained in what we do.
That whole sort of Silicon Valley sort of investment piece, and I do think that the startups particular, and that is down to that, I suppose, the success of that Silicon Valley machine or the sausage machine that seems to produce such good organizations come out of it. And we've had 2 or 3 of our vendors in the last 6 months go very successful IPOs, and it's great to see that journey. Obviously, we've just come out of the most unusual times, I think, in history, and there's no sort of training or books or guidance that anyone's had to turn to, and it really has been challenging. And but thankfully, I know that we've both had successful businesses, and things have gone quite well for both of us in the last 6 months. How do we forecast for the next 12 or 18 months? And I'm not asking you for a golden bullet. I'm just putting it out there. It's going to be so difficult to forecast and plan for the next 18 months. A lot of companies are going to really struggle with that.
I think you're right. With COVID, we are treading on really new waters, right? None of us expected this. It's definitely going to go on longer. One of the things that I can tell you is that we've seen different organizations respond completely differently, right? Some organizations have just hunkered down and said, we're going to freeze things and we're just going to try to get through this. And other organizations have actually expanded their networks and invested right now in their networks because they're realizing that more of their people are remote. And so that they have to make that more robust. We have a corporate mantra to keep it simple. And we are taking that to a new level now. whether that's doing proof of concepts or whether that's doing initial installations. We're trying to do more and more of that remotely and drive the simplicity into our product so that it's even easier for our customers to install and use. I don't know if I have a silver bullet for forecasting. I don't. Oddly enough, it's one of my objectives this year, which I think is going to be a challenging one. But one of the things that we've done is we've really been able to get closer to our customers, right? We're really getting the understanding with our partners about what our customers' goals and objectives are during this time frame. And when you have a lot of customers that are in the healthcare organization, we've seen a lot of our healthcare customers invest in networks. Where they have the time to do that, I don't know, but they're realizing that now's a time that they need to invest and make sure that their tools give them the ability to respond. One of the things that we drive to is that with more and more people working from home, particularly the analysts and the operators of your network are working from home, for Endace, we've been a really good solution because we now can give them 2 or 3 days, maybe a week of look back of network history. So where they may have not been efficient in troubleshooting being remote, when you have that backstop of being able to look at yesterday's or 2 days or a week ago's traffic, you didn't lose it because you weren't at the office. We're helping them solve problems, even being remotely. I didn't really answer your question on how you're going to forecast, Ian, but I can tell you that it's a hard problem, and it's one of those things where I think getting as close to your customers as you possibly can, understanding the challenges that they're going through, understanding if their budgets are frozen, or understanding if you can help them because it's challenging, definitely allows you to forecast a little bit more accurately.
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier on in our conversation, I think that word trust is important. I think customers are also looking to partnerships, technologies that they trust as well. And I think if you've got strong relationships and you've got technologies that are reliable, trustworthy, but also add value and also can save time and money, I think you should do quite well as a business. And I think particularly in the technology sector, I think if you haven't got that, then you need to be asking some questions of the business. In terms of, I suppose, a final question before we depart for the weekend, have you got any sort of predictions for the next sort of 6 or 12 months in terms of technologies that you'd like to cover off, or where do you think cyber is going to go in the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I know that's a great question. I wish I had the crystal ball here. What we're seeing more and more of, and we're getting this from our channel partners, and we're seeing it with our end users, is the mantra is integration, automation, and orchestration. So what I would expect to see in the next 12 to 18 months, more companies actually implementing SOAR products. We just partnered with Palo Alto's Cortex X SOAR product because we see larger enterprises wanting to automate as much of the incident response process as possible. It's still quite a bit of manual labor, and dependent on the certain individuals that get assigned the specific alerts. And I think one of the big efficiencies that we're going to see in the next 12 to 18 months is that integration, automation, orchestration piece, because it's going to take some of the variability out of how corporations respond to their incident response, to their alerts. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. No, that's fascinating stuff, and I really do appreciate your time that you've taken out today to join us for our podcast series. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of ASM Connected. Over the next few weeks, we've got some more great guests joining us on the podcast, so make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out. If you'd enjoyed this episode, then we'd really appreciate it if you could leave a review on your podcast app of choice. Finally, if you'd like to find out more about what we do here at ASM, head over to our website at asmtech.com.